I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and this is Focus on Israel. Today, our youth are being targeted from every angle in our society, in the media and music, and in the educational systems. Unfortunately, in the public school system and on university campuses, there is a very heavy onslaught of both anti-Christ and anti-Israel indoctrination. As parents and citizens, it's time to say enough is enough. Hello, I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and thank you for joining me today on Focus on Israel. In 2005, I founded Proclaiming Justice to the Nations to stop the silence, to wake up Christians and people of conscience to the realities of a world bent on destroying Israel and the Jewish people. From the start, PJTN has had a proven track record of fighting for the rights of Israel and the Jewish people, a record of standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds against a world of Jew and Israel hatred, a record of not compromising on the very plan of God. On today's program, we'll be speaking once again about the importance of reaching our youth and teaching them not only a godly lifestyle and biblical worldview, but the vital importance of Israel and the Jewish people. We know that our future and the future of our world lie in the hands of our children and grandchildren, the next generation. Unfortunately, we have sometimes erroneously presumed that the younger generation will automatically carry on with our biblical beliefs and values. We must become very proactive in our approach of sharing the biblical truths with them. Those who are driven by an extreme hatred of both Christ and Israel are aggressive in their focused goal of capturing the hearts and minds of our youth. And one of the primary battlegrounds is America's educational systems. Our children's textbooks are being rewritten by Islamists. They are literally being rewritten, eroding the foundations of our Judeo-Christian faith and its virtues. Regardless, this dangerous trend, Dennis Ibarra and Gary Tobin have authored a book entitled The Trouble with Textbooks, Distorting History and Religion. As these authors pointed out, textbooks around the world are blatantly used as tools for propaganda. We know, for example, that in the Middle East, the children's textbooks are very slanted, favoring Islam and its teachings and denouncing Judaism and Christianity, and we would expect that to be the case. However, the shocking reality is that we are seeing the very same biases against Judaism and Christianity in Western society and in our own American schools. Islam is being promoted while our faith is being belittled and presented in a questionable light. Many times, both Judaism and Christianity are listed in American textbooks as legends, tales, or fables, while Islam is being portrayed as fact and even glorified. Researchers Ibarra and Tobin studied and analyzed the 28 most widely used textbooks in public schools, and what they found is very alarming. Their research reveals that textbooks include negative stereotypes of Jews, Judaism, and Israel, and they discredit the ties between Jews and their land of Israel. How has this happened in our own country and in our own backyards? Organizations like the Council on Islamic Education have been allowed too much influence, and the unfortunate result is textbooks that are anti-Christian, anti-Semitic, and anti-Israel. We as Christians and American citizens must wake up and understand that we are in a major battle for this next generation, and sadly, it would appear at this time that we're losing this battle. Those who desire to erode our country's Judeo-Christian heritage and steal our youth are very serious indeed. taking advantage of our vulnerable youth is one of their top strategies in how to gain a foothold in order to bring a country under Islamic rule, little by little. Regardless of the approach they use, we must remain very clear that their bottom line agenda is extreme anti-Christ and anti-Semitic indoctrination to its very core. So how do we reach the young people? Well, music is one way, and one Jewish singer has made strides in using the sound of our times to teach and bring light to dark subjects. Ari Lesser is a singer, songwriter, rapper, and spoken word artist from Cleveland, Ohio. He has performed all over the world and written hundreds of songs on a wide range of subjects. Ari's repertoire is expansive, touching on everything from history to animals to Star Wars, but now his focus and his passion is making music based on the Torah. Here's Ari with his song, Boycott Israel.
Boycott Israel if you think that's just. But unless you have a double standard, you must also boycott the rest of the nations with allegations of human rights violations. We're not perfect, but if you think we're the worst, first take a look at the rest of the earth. Don't pick and choose to pick on the Jews. Pick up the paper and read the news. Boycott North Korea. I don't think you'll see a country in the world that could be unfreer. Boycott China. Let's not forget they stole the whole country of Tibet. Boycott Japan, slaughtering thousands of helpless innocent whales and dolphins. Boycott Vietnam, where they choose to use drug addicts as slaves to shell cashews. Boycott Cambodia, grabbing up land 5 million acres from the poor man's hand. Boycott Thailand for shutting the door and deporting refugees back to the war. Boycott Burma, don't let your cash slip into the grip of that military dictatorship. Boycott India, women can't escape when the government officials are guilty of rape. Boycott Pakistan, crazy country where they execute people for blasphemy. And boycott Afghanistan, opium land where the poppy fields stand in the Taliban's hand. And boycott Israel if you think that's just. But unless you have a double standard, you must also boycott the rest of the nations with allegations of human rights violations. We're not perfect, but if you think we're the worst, first take a look at the rest of the earth. Don't pick and choose to pick on the Jews. Pick up the paper and read the news. Boycott Syria, their government's killing thousands of innocent unarmed civilians. Boycott Iraq, make them change the laws. They lock up and torture people without cause. Boycott Iran with the greatest rate of execution out of every other state. Boycott Turkey because they've always denied and lied about the Armenian genocide. Boycott Turkmenistan, where the only media that you ever see is what the president of media. Boycott Uzbekistan, government's rotting, enslaving children to harvest cotton. Boycott Russia because every year more Muslims mysteriously disappear. Boycott Ukraine, where the politicians lock up the opposition so there's no competition. Boycott Belarus, presidents gotta go. You know those elections are just for show. And boycott Germany cause there's no reparation for murdering half the Jewish population. And boycott Israel if you think that's just. But unless you have a double standard, you must also boycott the rest of the nations with allegations of human rights violations. We're not perfect, but if you think we're the worst, first take a look at the rest of the earth. Don't pick and choose to pick on the Jews. Pick up the paper and read the news. Boycott Sudan, the Darfur genocide, where hundreds of thousands have already died. Boycott Egypt, and don't let that narrow-minded president keep acting like Pharaoh. Boycott Saudi Arabian oppression of women getting beat up, treated like possessions. Boycott Bahrain, police brutality against the Shiites by the Sunni monarchy. Boycott Yemen, make them stop the obscene execution of juveniles under 18, boycott Eritrea, national slavery, where they work for free indefinitely, boycott the Congo, doing terrible things to sell blood, diamond, engagement rings, a boycott Zimbabwe, you find all kind of torture behind those government minds, a boycott South Africa, make them pay for the hundreds of women raped every day, boycott Ivory Coast, sound the alarm, there's thousands of slaves on those cocoa farms, and boycott Israel if you think that's just, but unless you have a double standard you must also boycott the rest of the nations where allegations of human rights violations. We're not perfect, but if you think we're the worst, first take a look at the rest of the earth. Don't pick and choose to pick on the Jews, pick up the paper and read the news. Boycott Chile because they deny abortions even if the mother would die, and boycott Brazil where the brutal police kill thousands of people to keep the peace. Boycott Venezuela, closer inspection shows that the socialists stole the election. Boycott Colombia, putting out the lights of anyone who fights for union rights. Boycott Ecuador for stealing the lands of indigenous people for their corporate plans. And boycott Costa Rica where they've applied so much pesticide that hundreds have died. Boycott Honduras where a journalist gets shot if he writes anything like this. Boycott Mexico in the war on drugs, the military acts like the cartel thugs. Boycott the USA, make them pay for torturing people in Guantanamo Bay. And boycott Cuba, but if the government hears you criticize them, you'll be locked up for years. Boycott Israel if you think that's just, but unless you have a double standard you must also boycott the rest of the nations where allegations of human rights violations. We're not perfect, but if you think we're the worst, first take a look at the rest of the earth. Don't pick and choose to pick on the Jews, pick up the paper and read the news.
This month marks the 70th anniversary of the historic Declaration of the State of Israel. God's sovereign hand can be seen all over this land. Included in the celebrations is the opening of the American Embassy right here in Jerusalem. In honor of this celebration, PJTN is offering a special 70th anniversary package, which includes a captivating new book and an award-winning DVD. Israel Rising is a unique visual story of Israel's miraculous journey from unforgiving desert to thriving nation. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a future time in which the arid land of Israel would come alive for its people. Now this breathtaking book documents the fulfillment of this vision, as rarely seen photographs from the 1880s to the 1940s are juxtaposed with recent photos of the same locations. This book will inspire and captivate you as it illuminates Israel's foretold awakening in a new and unforgettable way. In addition, you'll receive the award-winning documentary, Israel Indivisible: The Case for the Ancient Homeland. This inspiring film examines the many political twists and turns that make Israel the world's most controversial nation. From Abraham and the Promise to the issues facing the Jewish state today, the film examines the historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical foundations for the modern state of Israel. This is a limited time offer for these two remarkable resources for just a one-time gift of $70 today. Your generous donation will help ensure that PJTN stays on the front lines and in the headlines of all the important issues facing Israel and our Jewish brethren. So please go to pjtn.org today. From studying history, it's very clear that what starts with the Jews never ends only with the Jews. We must strongly stand against any anti-Semitic trends, for if not stopped, they'll cause harm to all of us, and we'll witness the downfall of our Judeo-Christian Western culture. Today, many people say there's no longer a need for a Jewish state, that Jews around the world no longer need a place of refuge. But anyone who has heard recent statistics about the worldwide rise in anti-Semitism would never make such a claim. The reality is that neo-Nazi groups and Nazi sympathizers are increasing around the world. Surveys show that over 1 billion people in the world harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. Close to 50% believe that Jews have too much power in the business world, and 2/3 of the world's population has never heard of the Holocaust or believe the historic accounts of it are inaccurate. Don't let yourself be manipulated by evil people with a wicked agenda. When the self-serving villains are in control, good people from all religions suffer. Muslims, Christians, and all people of conscience should stand proudly and show respect for a country that gives so much to the world in so many ways. Do your part, do your research, and do what you can to make a difference. Because what happens in Israel does affect us all. This is not just a Jewish or just an Israeli problem. This is a problem for all humanity, for each and every one of us who believe in freedom and human rights. Learn more about what you can do at pjtn.org. Today, many of our university and college campuses have become overrun with anti-Christ and anti-Israel extremism. Israel is under assault on North American college campuses today like never before. Anti-Israel activities to alienate, demonize, and delegitimize Israel are increasingly crossing the line into anti-Semitism in the form of hate speech, harassment, and intimidation. Up next is a cut from Crossing the Line. The Intifada Comes to Campus, produced by acclaimed filmmaker Raphael Shore. It explores the proliferation of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic incidents on North American college campuses. In particular, the film explores the rapid growth of such incidents following the launch of Operation Cast Lead by Israel's military into Gaza in late December 2008 and January 2009. The documentary demonstrates the blurring of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic lines, showing how the war evoked deep anti-Jewish sentiments amongst college students and professors.
The great American university. For some, it's the route to riches. For others, a path to the endless party. But for many students, it's a time to broaden one's mind and begin to shape the world we live in. University has always been a crucible for social change and reform. Civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, get out of Vietnam, let's give peace a chance. But there is one issue that seems to evoke more passion and hostility than any other. More and more, this issue is taking center stage, not only on campus, but around the world. In response to Hamas's firing of thousands of rockets into civilian areas, Israel retaliated with Operation Cast Lead. The war in Gaza sparked intense reactions across the world. Free! Free Palestine! But there was something different about these protests, something disturbing. These protests weren't just against Israel. They were also against Jews. We saw synagogues, graves, and Jewish buildings desecrated in Venezuela, France, and Switzerland. In Sweden, protesters threw rocks, bottles, and pipe bombs into crowds of pro-Israel supporters, and rampaging mobs tried to shut down the Davis Cup tennis tournament because an Israeli team was due to play. In the UK, Israeli flags were burned and authorities were unable to control the protesters. And you had to ask yourself, is this happening in some Middle Eastern country or on the streets of San Francisco? These were more than anti-Israel protests. This was something else. Nuke, nuke Israel! Nuke, nuke Israel! And you know you have a problem when on the streets of America, they're calling for the death of Jews.
Stand up to the oven! You need a big oven, that's what you need!
As bad as things are around the world, there are few places as intense as North American college campuses where this kind of hostility has been raging for years.
free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
I think the situation on campus generally is a deteriorating one.
This is for my grandfather. Among the law!
The level of intensity on campus is beyond, like, words can't even explain.
Israel is pursuing a genocide option against Palestinians in Gaza. This can no longer be ignored.
The college campus is the battleground for and against Israel and Jewish interests around the country.
It isn't a joke. It's not just about people trying to say, here, look what's going on in the Gaza Strip. It's about taking the Middle East war and bringing it to campus in an intellectual framework that didn't really allow for freedom of speech.
We Palestinians have nothing to dialogue about with Zionists.
Today, one can find anti-Israel activities on almost all major universities in North America. But some schools are worse than others.
Boycott Israel! Boycott Israel!
I would say that the anti-Israel sentiment varies on different campuses. I know, for example, my campus, UC Irvine, is considered to be fairly radical.
UC Irvine has become a base for Palestinian support. That's right, Irvine. UC Irvine, right?
We see lots of angry protests and rallies. As well as a lot of anti-Israel programs.
You have a whole plethora of anti-Israel speakers being brought onto campuses to condemn Israel from all different directions and all different messages.
The Palestinian people are the victims of one of the greatest crimes of the 20th century.
You have students using guerrilla theater, where it might be out in the middle of campus, different types of protests or activities taking place trying to condemn Israel.
The level of anti-Zionism is spreading rapidly. And I would say that the situation has become bigger than all of us, bigger than the administration, in the way that they don't even know how to handle it anymore.
And on some campuses like Berkeley, it's just nobody really tries to hide it. The anti-Israel sentiment is out there, whether it's in the classroom or in the, or on Sproul Plaza.
I was really shocked that in my anthropology class at Bryn Mawr College, my anthropology professor used this class as a platform for her own political ideas that were very anti-Israel.
It's a sadly comic reality that today's generation knows little about their Judeo-Christian heritage or history. Even worse, few even care. So how do we counter this tide of darkness against our children, ourselves, and our way of life? Arming ourselves and our children with the truth is crucial. We've shown only a part of the revealing documentary Crossing the Line, and the full film is a must-see. It's available at JerusalemU.org, along with the second film in the series. Up next is another music video from Ari Lesser. This one takes a musical punch at the supposed apartheid state of Israel.
No, no, no. No, no, no. People say Israel's an apartheid state, but I can't relate to that baseless hate. It's not really fair to try and compare a racist regime with the war on terror. Using common sense against violence, Israel had to build up the border fence. And if you think that's apartheid, it's because you don't know what apartheid really was. For 2,000 years the Jews all roamed, but we always called Israel our home. Unlike the British and Dutch who came to South Africa where they had no claim. They already had countries overseas, but they wanted to expand with new colonies, so they conquered the natives, bought and sold their land they stole, full of diamonds and gold. The whites united and decided to create South Africa as a democratic state, but soon they denied blacks voting rights, so the whole government was controlled by whites. The House and the Senate and all of the courts were white, so the black people got no support. Plus the police would arrest and beat any peaceful protesters in the street. They divided everybody into 4 different races, moved them by force into separate places. So if you were Indian, black or brown, you had no business in no white town. They had segregation of transportation, buses, bus stops, trains and train stations, separate ambulance, different doctor and nurse, and the black hospitals were always worse. Restaurants, hotels, and the public park might be off limits if your skin was dark. It was a crime, and you could get more than a fine if you crossed the line of that whites only sign. They had separate teachers at different schools, black and white beaches and swimming pools, cafes and movie theaters wouldn't let folks in, discriminating if they had the wrong color skin. No mixed marriage, it was a criminal act for a white person to have sex with a black. Apartheid went from the womb till the tomb, couldn't even take a dump in the same bathroom. People say Israel's an apartheid state, but I can't relate to that baseless hate. It's not really fair to try and compare a racist regime with the war on terror. Using common sense against violence, Israel had to build up the border fence. And if you think that's apartheid, it's because you don't know what apartheid really was.
The importance of reaching and teaching the next generation is so vital. As Nehemiah said in his day, we must fight for our sons and daughters, for our families, and for our land. The time to stand up is now. One person can make a difference. Get involved and support pro-Israel organizations such as PJTN. Visit our website, sign up to receive free action alerts, and order our films to share with others. Please encourage your family and friends to tune in and watch. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren and all Israel. We'll see you next time on Focus on Israel.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.